Hello once again, friends and enemies. My name is Toxy and welcome back to Weird Deck Techs. The archetype we'll be talking about today is an archetype that encompasses one of the biggest parts of Western culture and was actually at one point in time a TCG exclusive archetype. That archetype is the Ultra Athletes, UA for short. Ultra Athletes are a really easy to play deck that isn't really ever touched on. The athletes themselves rely on the super simple gimmick of tributing an athlete on the field in order to special summon a UA monster from your hand. Honestly, there's not much more to say about them than that. So let's go ahead, take a look at the deck, and see if we can determine if it can play ball with the other archetypes that we're used to. And here we have it, my UA Ultra Athletes deck list. So what I'm going to do here, in case you haven't watched before, I'm going to go over each card individually, tell you what the card does. I'm going to show you a little bit about how the deck would play if you were playing on a field, and then we're going to go over what might make the archetype a little bit better and how to make this deck build a little bit better. Getting into it, we got 3 copies of UA Player Manager, our boss monster for the deck. If you normal or special summon a UA monster, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is special summoned, you can activate one of these effects. The first, target one card on the field and destroy it. The second, negate the effects of all face-up monsters on the field until the end of this turn, except UA monsters. You can only use each effect of UA Player Manager once per turn. There were a few level 7 to 8 UA monsters that I saw that were kind of supposed to act like boss monsters, but this is the one that I thought really felt most like a boss monster out of all of those, and that should tell you something about the rest of them. Moving on, 2 copies of UA Dreadnought Dunker. You can special summon this card from your hand by returning one UA monster you control to the hand, except UA Dreadnought Dunker. You can only special summon UA Dreadnought Dunker once per turn this way. Now, this effect text is going to happen on the rest of the UA monsters, so I'm not going to repeat it again. If this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can target one card on the field and destroy it. 2 copies of UA Blockbacker. Once per turn, when your opponent special summons a monster, you can change their battle positions, and if you do, negate their effects. So far, pretty self-explanatory. UA Rival Rebounder. If this card is special summoned during your opponent's turn or normal summoned, you can special summon one UA monster from your hand or graveyard, except UA Rival Rebounder. You can only use this effect of UA Rival Rebounder once per turn. This card is meant to combo off of our turnover tactics or our man of the match. Next up, 2 copies of UA Goalkeeper. Once per turn during your opponent's turn, you can target one UA monster you control. Once during this turn, it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. This is a quick effect. Gotta have a little bit of protection for your guys out there. 2 copies of UA Mighty Slugger. If this card attacks, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. 2 copies of UA Perfect Ace. Once per turn during your opponent's turn, when a card or effect is activated, you can discard one card, negate that activation, and if you do, destroy it. This is a quick effect. A pretty decent Omni Negate, I would say, especially since we do have Rival Rebounder and Man of the Match grabbing from our graveyard, and I'm pretty sure we have one more card in here also that I can't remember, but yeah, I think it's a pretty decent Omni Negate. Moving on to one of our 2 level 4s in the entire archetype, we've got UA Libero Spiker. During your opponent's main phase quick effect, you can shuffle one level 5 or higher UA monster from your hand into the deck, and if you do, special summon one UA monster from your deck with a different name, then return this card to the hand. You can only use this effect of UA Libero Spiker once per turn. So it's a double bounce that gets you a specific monster from your deck, which I think is pretty good for what it does. And last for our monsters in our last level 4, we've got 3 copies of UA Midfielder. During either player's turn, you can target one other UA monster you control, return that face-up monster to the hand, then special summon one UA monster from your hand with a different name from that monster. You can only use the effect of UA Midfielder once per turn. Moving on to spell cards of the deck, we've got UA Powered Jersey and Equip Spell. We've got 2 copies of it. Equip only to a UA monster, it gains 1000 attack and defense. Also, if it battles an opponent's monster, any battle damage it inflicts to your opponent is doubled. If the equipped monster destroys a monster by its attack, it can make a second attack during this battle phase. During your standby phase, banish the equipped monster. If this card is sent to the graveyard because the equipped monster was returned to the hand, you can return this card to the hand. 3 copies of Yugioh Hyper Stadium, a field spell. This card is also always treated as an FA card. This is going to be the first time that FA is mentioned in this deck. FA stands for Formula Athletes, which is kind of like just race car drivers and such like that. They don't really mesh all that well with the UAs as far as I've seen, but maybe there's just something there that I'm not seeing. Anyway, when this card is activated, you can add 1 UA or FA monster from your deck to the hand, or add 1 UA Stadium from your graveyard to the hand. You can reveal 1 field spell from your hand and pay 1,000 life points. You can normal summon 1 UA or FA monster during your main phase this turn, in addition to your normal summoner set. You can only gain this effect once per turn, and you can only activate 1 UA Hyper Stadium per turn. We've got 1 copy of the downgraded UA Stadium field spell. If a UA monster is normal summoned to your side of the field, you can add 1 UA monster from your deck to the hand. Once per turn, if a UA monster is special summoned to your side of the field, all monsters you currently control gain 500 attack even if this card leaves the field. I figured being able to search on activation with Hyper Stadium was better than being able to search on summon with UA Stadium just in case you couldn't get a summon, but I digress. We have 3 copies of UA Signing Deal. Special summon 1 UA monster from the deck, but its effects are negated. Also, it cannot be used as Synchro or Xyz material for a summon. Then you lose life points equal to the level of the monster you special summoned by this effect times 300. You can only activate 1 UA Signing Deal per turn. I figured that this is one of the 3 starting cards in the entire deck, and losing life points equal to the level of a monster isn't that bad comparatively to not having a monster on the field. Moving on, 2 copies of UA Locker Room, a quick play spell, which is also always treated as an FA card. Target 1 UA or FA monster you control or in your graveyard, add it to the hand, and if you do, you gain 500 life points. Then you can apply this effect. Reveal any number of UA and or FA monsters in your hand, shuffle them into the deck, then draw cards equal to the number of shuffled cards. You can only activate 1 Locker Room per turn. This really just seems like an okay draw spell to me, but that's my opinion. Lastly, for spells, we got 2 copies of UA Turnover Tactics, a quick play spell. If you control 2 or more UA monsters with different names, shuffle as many monsters on the field as possible into the deck. Then, special summon UA monsters from your deck that have different names from each other up to the number of cards shuffled into your main deck. But those monsters cannot attack this turn. Then, your opponent can special summon monsters from their deck up to the number of cards shuffled into their main deck. You can only activate 1 Turnover Tactics per turn. I figured this was a pretty good risk and reward card. Moving on to the traps of the deck, we've got 3 copies of UA Penalty Box, a continuous trap. At the start of the damage step, if your UA monster battles an opponent's monster, you can banish that opponent's monster until your opponent's second end phase. You can only activate this effects of Penalty Box once per turn. You can banish this card from your graveyard, add 1 UA spell card from your deck to the hand. And last for the deck, 3 copies of UA Man of the Match. This card is also treated as an FA card. After damage calculation, if your UA or FA monster destroyed an opponent's monster by battle, or when your UA or FA monster inflicts battle damage to your opponent, special summon any number of UA and or FA monsters with different names from your hand and or graveyard in defense position. You can only activate 1 Mana of the Match per turn. And there we go, we have the deck. This deck does not have any main deck cards, and I feel like most of these cards are pretty self-explanatory in why I added them into the deck. So let's go ahead, take a look at how you would play them on the field, and then come back for a little analysis. Alright, so we're going to take a look at how you would play this deck on the field. Starting off already kind of weak, I have had to reset the deck once, meaning this is the second hand that I've tried to pull. But we opened with our boss monster, we opened with 2 rebounders, and we opened with a Hyper Stadium. So Hyper Stadium can at least get us something, so we'd activate Hyper Stadium. This will allow you to grab either of your starters, either of your level 4s from your deck. Midfielder is going to be the one that I would grab here, so we're going to grab that, put midfielder into hand. We can normal summon our midfielder, which will obviously allow us to special summon our player manager. Now if we're going first, our player manager obviously can't do anything, so what we're going to do is we're going to set our card and we're going to pass. However, during our opponent's turn, if we find an opening, we can go ahead and use Midfielder's effect to knock our player manager back into our hand, play one of our rebounders, and then once our rebounder gets played, since our player manager is in our hand, that will allow us to special summon our player manager once more, activating its effect. And then of course we have our penalty box set during our opponent's turn as well. So in case they attack one of our monsters, we can go ahead, activate our penalty box, banish their monster until their second end phase. And there we go. That's how you would play Ultra Athletes on the field. Now that we've seen how the deck plays, let's talk about how we could fix this archetype. This archetype, in my opinion, doesn't seem all that good. It seems like you would more so build this archetype just to have fun with it. I feel like a good way to make this archetype a little bit better would be to, one, add at least one extra level 4 or lower monster to the deck. Make it a little more consistent, just a tiny bit. Maybe even add another spell card that can either search out a card to pull into your hand, or add another card that can just special summon from the deck. Another good idea would be to do what they did with Stadium and kind of revamp Locker Room and just make it so that you can shuffle your cards back into your deck and then draw the same amount of cards, but that's just my opinion. There's not a lot I feel like the archetype itself can do. It just kind of feels like an archetype that somebody would play for fun, and to make the deck better, I'm still a little lost here. You'd probably want to put in some generic level 4 monsters. Of course, we've got the generic cards that everyone always puts in. Of course, a good addition would be terraforming, metaverse, cards like that. You could put in a Foolish Burial to help those cards that allow you to grab a card from your graveyard. Foolish Burial would probably make Locker Room a little bit better, except for the fact that you would have to draw into Foolish Burial. Overall, this deck I'm kind of indifferent about. I don't want to say that I hate the deck, but I don't really like it all that much. But there we have the Ultra Athletes. And there we have Ultra Athletes. How do you feel about the UA deck? Do you think that it's a perfectly fine deck, especially one for beginners, or do you think that you're still on the fence about it? It's kind of eh. Let me know down in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, drink your water.